two High Commissioners, the New Zealand High Commissioner to Fiji and the Fijian High Commissioner to New Zealand, our host, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me much pleasure to be here. My apologies for the delay actually, there was some confusion with the timing. Look, I mean, I don't want to make a very long speech, but essentially to say that government is very much here to provide an enabling environment for investors. And it's not just the traditional investors as such, but also more to open up the doors to get the knowledge base that we perhaps lack in Fiji. And it includes areas in such as services. For example, there's a shortage of engineers in Fiji. There's a shortage of various other professions in Fiji that we do not have the local capacity for. I've been recently going around Fiji. We've started up a program last year where prior to the actual budget itself, we go around and actually have public consultations in every single town in Fiji. We don't just do that, we visit all the major university campuses. We also even go to high schools in each district and get all the high schools together to get to hear from the young people of Fiji. 69.4% of the entire population of Fiji is below the age of 40. So obviously there's challenges there, but also a lot of opportunities. We have more SIM cards in operation in Fiji than the actual number of people. Obviously it means some people carry more than one SIM card. But we also have something like 500,000 smartphones in operation in Fiji. We, a few years ago, zero-rated duty, for example, on mobile phones, essentially for that uptake in technology. It means you have a very savvy, technologically savvy young population, which also means an opportunity in the areas of the ITC. We have a number of call centers. We of course can increase the number of call centers that's available, back-end processing, data processing. Mindpearl, which is a South African company, a few years ago set up a call center in Fiji. And I was actually very interested as to why they came to Fiji. And they said there were two major things that apparently attracted them to Fiji. One of them was the time zone in which we are in. And secondly, was that apparently we have neutral accents. They don't actually have to spend millions of dollars to actually get people to change their accents for somebody in Arkansas to understand if they ring up, or some Australian or Kiwi even for that matter. So in places like India and Philippines, they actually spend literally millions of dollars for them to get the twang or get rid of some other twang so that somebody can understand them, whoever's calling them from across the oceans. We have, for example, for that particular company at that point in time, we did provide an incentive where we gave them various subsidies depending on the number of people they employed. We now, of course, have a very attractive package in respect of people investing in the ITC sector. But as I was saying outside, that a number of areas, even things like trade skills, high-end trade skills, we of course have a shortage of that ourselves. We have recently set up 13 technical colleges to be able to train our young people in particular. There's of course not so young people also going to these colleges to get that depth, not just in the sort of the professional skill sets, but also to have the numbers. We have at this point in time a couple of construction companies that have actually brought people in from Bangladesh, Philippines and Indonesia to fill in that void. So there are opportunities in that area. We have opportunities, for example, in what I call not necessarily the top end of engineering, but things like boiler makers, the type of investments that's taking place at the moment. We do need those type of skill sets. We do need that type of consultancy services. And there's numerous opportunities, of course, for New Zealand companies and individuals from New Zealand. We also have, of course, the ability to in the medical field, we have currently the Minister for Health and a couple of the permanent secretaries in India at the moment looking at recruiting specialist doctors. But we also, for example, like in Fiji, speech therapists. We don't actually have a single speech therapist in Fiji. It was interesting, when we went to the high school consultations, and a lot of the high school students complained about the fact that we don't have enough professional student counselors. And yes, and that is a fact. And a lot of the teachers who are not necessarily trained in the area of counseling are actually doubling up as counselors. So when I said there's about 250 students, I said, well, how many of you actually would like to study counseling or psychology to become professional counselors? Not a single person put up their hand. The reality is, of course, because the mindset in Fiji as far as parents are concerned, they don't necessarily see counseling as a career path. because for them it's the doctor or the lawyer or the engineer perhaps. But so, I mean, there's a lot of challenges that we do have too. The economy has been growing consecutively for the past 7 years. This is only the second time in our post-independent history that's ever happened. We expect it to grow now consecutively for the next 8 to 9 years. But we as government realize that you need to have the right resources and right interventions at the right time to ensure that we actually capitalize on that growth. Otherwise it actually can become stagnant, and in fact we can lose that momentum. So at the moment our major critical issue is to get the right human resources in at the right places in the right sectors. As far as from government's perspective, we believe there's a lot of opportunity in Fiji in the agricultural sector. There's vast areas of land that is underutilized. We now have amended the laws. So previously, for example, if you leased land for agricultural purposes, your lease would only be for 30 years. So you don't see much commercial enterprise or large-scale commercial farming in the agricultural sector. And we also see an absence of the mainstream commercial banks in that space also. So now with the leases being able to be given for up to 99 years, as you find in the tourism sector, we see that there's a lot of opportunity. People can actually invest in that sector. We can have more of a technological uptake. Compared to, for example, New Zealand, the agricultural sector is way behind as far as the technological uptake is concerned. It's very rudimentary in that perspective. So we think there's a lot of opportunity there, even for foreign investors, to get into the agricultural space. We hardly do any value adding. The value adding that we do in the agricultural sector is very, very limited. Some of it just simply involves, cleaning it and sending it across to New Zealand. We don't actually. Recently, somebody brought me a packet of tamarind, being eaten as a savory. It's beautiful. There's no preservatives put in it. They simply dry it, and this package is fantastic to eat, from Thailand. We have tamarind trees galore in Fiji, but we have not got into that space. We have jackfruits galore in Fiji. We're not doing anything without jackfruit. So a lot of opportunities, and you'd rather eat the fruits from Fiji than to eat it from, Thailand. The fruits are a lot sweeter. Our pineapples are a lot sweeter, more organic. Some areas, of course, with the potential to go 100% organic. So I think the agricultural sector is a key area. The other area, of course, as we mentioned previously, is in the services sector. We think there's enormous opportunities in the services sector. Fiji now, of course, is very well connected. As we say, that we fly to every single continent that rims the Pacific Ocean except South America. So Fiji Airways flies to LA, we fly to San Francisco, we fly to Hong Kong, we fly to Singapore. And of course, Korean Airways flies to Seoul 3 times a week. We of course connect to Australia and New Zealand. We're now flying to South Australia beginning June. So the level of connectivity is fairly good. Recently somebody told me from New Zealand, a New Zealander, that they're planning to go for a holiday from Auckland to Singapore, but to holiday in Malaysia, so catching one of those direct flights. I don't know if it was whether it was, I think they checked out Air New Zealand and Singapore Airlines. But they found it a lot more inexpensive flying business class from Auckland, Nandi, Singapore. We have, for example, we recognize this. For example, in the last budget that we announced, anybody transiting through Fiji 72 hours or less doesn't have to pay any departure tax. So a lot of people we do find, for example, they're flying across to the west coast of North America. They'll fly from Sydney, Nandi, LA. So we think there's a lot of opportunities if we become a bit clever about it and target it. The reason why I was raising that also is because there's also an opportunity for New Zealand companies, whether it's in the services sector, whether it's in other sort of hardcore manufacturing, to be able to know that you're well connected to the rest of the world, at least the continents rimming the Pacific Ocean. We have we are the hub of the Pacific. World Bank, for example, is now moving part of its regional office from Sydney to Suva. They'll have a complement of about 25 staff by March of next year. All the international agencies you can name, ILO, WHO, UNDP, they're all based here. Just a couple of days ago I had the pleasure of opening up an NGO funded by USAID to the tune of about $25 million called climate ready, and they've set up shop here now too. So for businesses that do set up in Fiji, your ability to connect to other agencies, multilateral agencies, ADB, World Bank, etc., you are very well placed. Your cost base, obviously, compared to downtown Auckland or downtown Sydney, is a lot more attractive in Fiji too. So I think there's those kind of synergies that you can develop and take advantage of the very well sort of positioned facilities we do have. We have been in the past number of years investing quite heavily in capital infrastructure works. As you can see, we're upgrading roads. We are investing in replacing a lot of the older infrastructure, whether it's electricity, whether it's water. So again, that in itself presents a lot of opportunities. We have New Zealand companies, of course, in our roading sector in Fiji at the moment, and I understand the contracts are up for renewal. I don't know whether they'll get it, maybe some other New Zealand companies, but the point of the matter is that they're creating a lot of opportunities in outsourcing also of works. We're trying to outsource a lot of the government works. We are liberalizing, for example, the transport sector. We have also, in respect of finding attractions in the terrorist space, what we can do. The double taxation agreement is there, but we like it updated. That's something that we've been knocking on the door for the New Zealand and also the Australian authorities to get the DTA revamped and make it a lot more contemporary. But ladies and gentlemen, I think I'd like to probably end around there, and we, of course, there are certain areas that we think that needs to be improved, in particular in the some of the processing of applications. To be frank, we think that there is a room for improvement. In fact, yesterday, through the budget consultations which we are having through the respective ministries, we are looking at how we can create a one-stop shop. For example, if you're applying for OHS certification, National Fire Authority, and various other agencies, how you can actually have that processed at one office, as opposed to currently going to all the different agencies to get the approvals. So these are some of the tweaking that we are doing also. We've recently signed an agreement with the Singapore International Corporation, which is an arm of the Singaporean government, to look at some quick wins in respect of some of the e-services that we provide through government. We have recently also, Parliament has approved the National Switch Act, which is essentially making it compulsory for all the banks to operate through a national switch. At the moment, all the banks independently operate, or they have their bilateral agreements with each other. So through the national switch, everybody will have to connect through a centralized switching system, which means that it's not just the banks that can connect to that, but also other high cash institutions like the TLTB and the Fiji Sugar Corporation, which should bring down the cost of electronic transactions. And New Zealand is one of the well-known countries that has very attractive rates as far as electronic transactions are concerned. You can walk into a shop in New Zealand and pay $1.50 with your ATM card. In Fiji at the moment you cannot do that. They'll turn you away because the cost of that transaction is quite high. Or they pass on that cost to you. So you find a lot of shops, for example, saying $10 minimum transaction. We obviously want to get rid of that and have a lot more people through the electronic transactions. It means that a lot more people will also be mainstreamed. So there's a lot of opportunities in respect of, for example, providing financial services and other services that are linked to that. Ladies and gentlemen, we of course are work in progress. We have made a very significant change as far as infrastructure is concerned. We also have a government that's very much committed to an open merit recruitment system. We had an older system that was very much skewed in respect of not appointing people on merit. It was not an open, transparent process. So we've gone through that. We are working with the World Bank. We've rolled that open merit recruitment system out, and it's working well. We are attracting a lot more people from the private sector to work in the civil service. So for us, one of the key issues was to bring about that robustness in service delivery and be accountable to the public, was to appoint the right people in the civil service. The other major issue that we have also been working with is working a lot more closely with the regulators, the Fiji Revenue and Customs Authority, getting them to also mainstream their services, or streamline the services, I should say. And that's also working well too. So we hope that through your seminar you'd be able to also provide to us some feedback in respect of perhaps some things that you may see in Fiji that can be improved We're always very open about these things, and we don't sort of see it as a negative, issue that if you comment to us as to how things can be improved, because we essentially at the end of the day want to provide much better services to you and also to all Fijians. But what I wanted to highlight to you is that there has been very little emphasis in the adaptation space as far as climate change is concerned. Nearly 80% of all the funds that have been pledged for climate change and funds that actually are in the kitty, 80% of that goes towards mitigation efforts. So when you have countries like Fiji and other Pacific Island countries and some other countries in the other parts of the world where the carbon footprint is actually very low, but they're at the cold face of climate change, so a lot of their resources need to be directed to adaptation measures. And what we have seen is that in the adaptation measures, very little private sector participation is there, unless they want to, for example, put in a tender to build, for example, a seawall or bridge or what have you. We think there's a lot of opportunities in that area, and we'll be also putting out a lot of literature, a lot of opportunities in that space. And the other thing that's also missing, for example, in the construction sector in Fiji, the uptake of technology in the construction sector is very, very minimal. So we recently commissioned the World Bank to help us look at the housing sector. In Fiji, the housing sector, we have a very low rate of home ownership in Fiji. We want to improve that. But to be able to provide the stockpile of homes, we need to ensure that the cost of building those homes, whether it's through strata titling, etc., is actually cost effective. The only way that we can do that is also through usage of new technology. So again, the construction industry in Fiji is very rudimentary. And as you have seen, for example, in the school rebuild after Cyclone Winston, we're spending now almost $180 million in the school rebuild. We had to go out and borrow from ADB and World Bank in excess of about $230 million. Now, we found that 98% of all the schools that we're actually rebuilding or building from scratch did not even have a architectural plan, did not have any engineer certification on any of those buildings. So now everything will have a blueprint, it's all been sort of electronically documented. But the point being is that to be able to build those schools very quickly, we need better technology. To be able to withstand future cyclones, we need better technology also. We need to build the resilience in the infrastructure. So again, I think there's a lot of opportunities for New Zealand companies. Post Winston, we had gone down to New Zealand. Some companies have spoken about that. We also have some very good tax breaks for people who actually get into the housing sector in Fiji. You get something like a 13-year tax holiday and carry forward your losses for about 8 years. Primarily the reason why we target that is because we need to get a stockpile of homes that are attractive pricing in Fiji. So government is very keen to work with partners in that respect. We also had similar sort of breaks in the medical field. As I mentioned, that one of the major issues for us in the medical field is getting the right human resources and the technology. As a result of the tax announcement, we now today see an Indian hospital that's bought out what is commonly known as super private hospital, is now NEOT, which is from the south of India. So they are providing a range of services that currently was not available. But again, there's opportunities in that space. So even if you want to set up, for example, a diagnostic center, minimum investment of $2 million with an MRI machine and CAT scanners, etc., will get tax holiday for 7 years. So we see these more as an opportunity to provide better services to our people. Obviously, if we're able to detect, diagnose, health conditions prior to hand, we can be able to cure that, and we get a productive society. So that's one of the ways that we are looking also. So there's opportunities there too. Thank you.